Thanks for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I've got with me again my friend Den Jones. I don't know if this is your third, fourth, fifth time on the podcast, but welcome back.
Hey Tony, hey, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I don't count it, but it has been many years since my Adobe days, I think, when I'd done the first one.
All right. Well, and we've done some more recently when you launched 909 Cyber. But I wanted to have you on this episode to talk about a new initiative you've got with 909 Shield, which I looking at what you've shared with me, I think it sounds fascinating. So just kind of tee it up, like what describe for the audience, like what is 909 Shield?
Yeah. Well, by way of introduction, I guess, right? So if people haven't saw me before, Den Jones, the CEO and founder of 909 Cyber, a consulting firm. And yeah, we got a new baby about to launch in mid-June. And it's called 909 Shield. And the whole premise of it is protecting protecting companies during the process of remote hiring, which we stumbled upon. Actually, there was no way, you and I had this conversation, right? It wasn't a plan at the beginning of building 909 Cyber. It evolved through a journey of trying to help cyber students get part-time work while they studied. And we had built a little platform for that. And as that evolved, and that actually only evolved because we were trying to figure out how we store and manage freelancers that work with 909 Cyber as consultants. And in the end, we took that student platform and evolved that into a marketplace. So it's called 909 Select, and it rivals Upwork. It focuses on cyber, IT, AI, and engineering roles in the US. So it's high-risk roles. And when you're doing high-risk roles, employers need confidence that the people on the platform are trusted, they are verified. So we've got things like identity proofing, employment background checks, Uber-style reviews. It is free to join as an employer or as a freelancer, and it's free to post a job as an employer. And the way we monetize it is that we charge 10% platform fee when an employer enters into an agreement with a freelancer. But in that process, Tony, we discovered that the whole interview thing, when we're doing this, like a remote interview, how does the employer really know that that's Tony? And there was a thing that we started to hear about, which is, first of all, on the fraud, is the first step is the applicant. Is the applicant the same person that matches the resume, that matches the LinkedIn profile? So that piece there is a big piece of the puzzle. The next piece of the dodgy puzzle becomes the interview proxy situation, or proxy interviews are called. And that's where people will swap out mid-interview. The other piece of the puzzle is AI fraud now. AI fraud is becoming a thing. Deep fakes is one thing, but the other thing, and the bigger growing thing, is leveraging AI to answer questions. And I spoke to a CISO yesterday. I mean, we've been speaking to a lot of CISOs and HR leaders on this. And I spoke to one yesterday, and he said, oh, and we had one last month where they had an earpiece in, and then somebody guiding them through the interview. And we're like, holy crap, we didn't think of that one, right? That scenario. But it's a thing. And the FTC says that US businesses in 2024 lost $500 billion to this epidemic. And this is loss of time, because you've got to maybe stage 3 of the interview and then you realize they're fraud, you got to start again. Or maybe you've done 10 interviews, different candidates, and then you realize 2 of them are fraudsters. So it's really a lot of wasted time. And then where the big money comes in, and you've probably heard of North Korean laptop farm workers. Well, that's a big thing. So the reality is if you've got that, or there's call centers in India where they're doing this thing too, and they end up getting 3-4 jobs they claim to be in the US. They're using fake identities. So we believe the 909 Shield has the ability to really stop this epidemic at the source before you even get to the first interview. And then ideally, if you do get to the first interview, then we're nailing it in the other steps in the process.
Let me step back. One of the things that I think is interesting is if we go back to the COVID pandemic and everyone had to work remote, and then never mind all the stuff that's happened since then with the back to office mandates and such.
Yeah.
The prevailing logic and the supporting data suggests that working remote was as good or better in terms of productivity in most cases. Like every study I saw from Microsoft, from whoever, was like, hey, this is actually working great. And in theory, a company could then decide to just not even have a headquarters. I know for a fact that, like, I know some companies, like I used to work for Alert Logic. They've been bought by Fortra, but they shut down their Houston office because they're like, well, everyone's working from home. Why are we paying for rent? And I think for a lot of companies, the reason that they're being so draconian about back to office mandates is tied in part to, well, we're locked into this lease on this office. We're paying for the office regardless. So like we need some butts in the seats, which is a silly reason. I get it, but also, maybe just make sure you don't renew that lease, because what's the point?
Yeah.
But out of that, I remember thinking what a huge benefit this was, because it meant that if I'm a company in Topeka, Kansas, that instead of saying, okay, I need to hire an IT engineer, so I'm going to post a job opening, and I'm going to interview only people who can physically come to this office, then I've now limited myself to people basically within like 30 miles of Topeka, Kansas.
Yeah.
And if it's a job that is possible to be done remotely, I exponentially expand the pool of good candidates I can choose from if I allow it to be remote. If I say, well, I don't care if you're in Portland, Maine, you as long as you can connect and do the job. And so that means I can hire the best person for the job, not just the best person in a 30-mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on where you are, it means I can hire more cost effectively, because instead of paying, like if you're in Silicon Valley, instead of having to pay someone Silicon Valley money, I can hire someone in Topeka, Kansas. And pay them that. And so, like, to me, there's all these benefits to remote work, and for the employees and for the employers. I feel like the if we're doing a ledger, the pros like dramatically outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
But then you fast forward a few years and it's like, all right, well, now I see that, this is a con. This is a big con. This goes on the list of cons of saying, it's great if I can hire someone in Topeka, Kansas. I can pay them a little less. They can work remotely. All of that's amazing. But how do I make sure that the guy that I interviewed in Topeka, Kansas isn't in North Korea?
Yeah.
How do I make sure that that the guy that I hired in Topeka, Kansas isn't actually working for 5 different companies simultaneously right now? Although I will make a separate argument, it was a whole separate conversation. I'll make a separate argument to say that I think employers should care less about that. Like not that someone should have 5 jobs, but that ultimately what you're paying an employee for is to say, okay, here's the job description, here's the tasks I expect, this is the productivity I expect from you in exchange for the money and benefits I'm paying you. So in exchange for your compensation, I expect this level of productivity.
Yeah.
Well, if I can do that while also doing that for another company or two, why should you care?
Yeah. And so you bring up a couple of great points, right? I'll take the number of companies business. As a leader for over 20 years, I've learned that I should not be hovering over my employee, making sure they're working. I should measure my employee based on performance and output, not the number of hours. And to your point, I don't give a crap if you work for 5 companies, Are you delivering the results, the performance and the quality that we expect for the price we pay? And that's an easy conversation, right? So I don't care if you work for 5 companies, 10 companies, you need to deliver for me and my business what you say you'll deliver, what we agree you'll deliver for what price. Now, the where you are piece, what we've looked at is we're basically, as part of the video call, we'll be scraping the telemetric data. We'll be looking at your IP and your location. We'll be showing that to the employer so the employer knows on the call, hey, Tony, you said you're here. But I can see on the screen that it actually says that you're coming from an IP range which is known by our threat feed to be tied to bad actor IP ranges. We can tell that you're using VPN or not. We can understand that information. So you can then, at least as the employer, be very aware of the threat risk. So we'll show a risk level,
Right.
or a trust score, right? And it's really funny, man. I'm just like, God, I've done zero trust at Adobe. I've done zero trust at Cisco. I worked for a zero trust company, and now I'm doing some zero trust on the humans. And the reality is, though, is we do need to do that. We need to do that in real time while the call is underway. So that where you live and where you are, I don't really care if you're traveling in Honolulu while you're having the interview, but the honesty would be good. If you say, hey, I'm based in Denver, but I'm traveling right now, it's good. It's good for the employer who's hosting the call to know that. And you know, it's a fine conversation to have. But what we are trying to do is eliminate the wasted time that an employer has to find and reveal that information. So we start off with a identity proofing piece. And that identity proofing piece will give us 2 things: telemetric data where you are and biometric data. And once we've got your biometric data, then we're going to create a hash. And then when you do every video call, we'll compare that hash of your face from the identity proofing to this one right now. And the next call, and the next call. And then the more companies that use Shield, every single call that Tony ever does where Shield is part of that ecosystem, we'll compare those hashes all the time. So if you've done an interview with Cisco and then you suddenly do an interview with Adobe and they use Shield, then we still know that Tony has done 20 interviews across 3 companies, and we're really thoughtful on the data we're going to store, because obviously cyber guy. So you don't want to store any data you don't have to, unless it's for the purpose of the functionality of the product. So we're going to be very thoughtful about what we store. We'll not know anything about the job you're interviewing for. I mean, we'll not save that information. We just need to save, this is the identity of Tony tied back to your identity proofing. And then we know that that lives on with you as you go through different calls.
Okay. Well, I was going to say too that in the last year or two, I've seen a number of videos either claiming to be legit or just proof of concept videos of people, doing real-time deep fake video.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of those 2 years, it has gotten progressively better. Like, initially it was like very uncanny valley. It's like, it was very obvious to anyone who knew anything about video to be like, yeah, that's not legit. And now it is much more legit. I saw one last week of somebody who had deep faked Will Smith. And so it was like Will Smith, and then you could see who the real person was in the corner box. And video wise, very convincing.
Yeah.
That said, there are experts who are like, okay, but that's still a parlor trick. That's still there are some ways to get around that. And I think for the purposes of this conversation, I want to sort of set the foundation of saying that's not necessarily what we're talking about. Like, the problem is much bigger than that. It's not just, oh, somebody in North Korea is going to do a real-time deepfake video. Like, maybe that is a concern, but that's just one concern out of
it's
many.
It's one piece of the puzzle, man. I mean, look, you get the fake people that apply for jobs and then turn up, right? And when fake people apply for jobs, the thing is the HR system is overloaded with 1,000 people applied. Well, not really. 30% or 40% are fake. So if they know that in order to apply, they're going to have to go through Shield, then that number will reduce significantly, and that will save time even at the beginning. The proxy interview thing, we can stop that. And then the AI thing, the AI one's really, really the fun piece of this puzzle, right? So we're building tech into the platform where we're looking for deep fakes, because it is possible to stop deep fakes at the moment. It's not easy, but it's possible. And then the other piece of the puzzle is leveraging AI to answer the questions. So we're building some jazzy fun stuff inside our platform where the employer in real time will understand whether they're leveraging AI or not. So a combination of the answers, a combination of their biometrics, their eye movements. So we're gonna, we think we've got a product, and like I say, it's going to release in about 2 weeks. And our roadmap is pretty simple right now. But the big thing for us is, we're seeking design partners right now.
Right.
We're looking for 5 design partners. We're actively in discussion with 2 right now. My feeling is by the end of June, we will have the 5 locked and loaded. Those 5 are going to get locked in at a really brilliant price for the next few years, or maybe 3 years. We've not finalized that yet, but they'll get locked in at a great price. And regardless, the pricing of this, as we set the pricing, needs to be significantly less than the cost of the problem we're solving, right? So the ROI needs to be that within the first month, you're saving money on this thing. I've worked as a practitioner for 30 years, right? I always know that the cost of the problem and the cost of the solution needs to be attractive enough that you're willing to spend the money. It can't be more than the cost of the problem. Otherwise, I'll just stick with the problem, right?
Right. Well, yeah. And I think you and I think have talked about this in the past, but I do feel like there should be like we need ethical capitalism. So like,
Yes.
so like if you're General Motors in the 1970s or whatever, and you determine that your car is dangerous and blows up and kills people, instead of having a memo where you say, okay, it turns out that the cost of litigation and paying death benefits is less than the cost of a recall, so let's not do the recall. It's like, well, okay, yes, on a pure mathematical business calculation, that makes sense on paper, but we're talking about human beings. And so like, maybe don't do that. So that's my one takeaway from what you said is like, well, yes, but you should look beyond just the simple math. The other thing I was going to say is like when we were talking about when you're doing a video interview, one of the things that it kind of reminded me of is, my kids, as they were going through college and doing like remote college classes, like some professors are, professors are all different, and some are more draconian than others in terms of like how they do testing. But my wife went back to school and dealt with this as well. But like some of them do testing where it's like in a lockdown browser session, and it's very like there's a whole thing where like they can tell what's open on, like you have to install something, they can tell what's open on your computer like actively while you're there. Your camera has to be on, and they have to be able to see you. They have to do a pan of the whole room to make sure nobody else is there with you. It's a whole thing. It's very tedious, but I guess it solves it's a draconian way to do it, but it does solve the problem of making sure that nobody is there giving you the answers. You don't have a notebook over here to your right with all the answers written down.
Yeah, and there's 2 things in that, right? One is when I started 909 Cyber, our tagline is pragmatic security that doesn't break the bank. The reality for me as a practitioner, I've seen this shit. Too many CISOs go in there, they roll in, and they just buy tool, spend lots of money, and they do check boxes and say, right, we've done all of these 10 things, incident, and cool, that's good, right? But the reality is reducing the risk for your business isn't necessarily doing the SANS top 10 and just buying tools for each one of them, right? So that pragmatic security thought that doesn't break the bank is top of mind when I think of how we price things. Now, when we talk about Shield, the cool thing about Shield, I was having a conversation yesterday, just as you talk about the whole schooling thing. Somebody was like, yesterday, they're like, oh, so they reached out, they're like, we've got a use case that we think this would be great for, which is when you're doing testing. So whether it's part of a job interview process, but you're doing testing as part of government certifications or something of that nature, they're like, they really struggle to know that that's the person that turned up. They struggle to know whether you're using AI or not in the test. So we're like, yeah, I guess Shield will be good for that use case as well. It's not the use case we thought of, but then all of a sudden, as we talk about this, we're getting HR leaders and CISOs coming to us or talking. Some are as outreach and some are coming to us and they're like, this is a problem. We spoke to a leading consulting firm just 2 weeks ago, and it was really funny because I set up the call with one of my good friends. He's a sales guy. I've been a customer of his many times over the years, and he's leading this CRO for this company. But I reached out to him because they are predominantly consulting, and they use a lot of freelancers. And I think he was a bit skeptical. And then I sat in front of the HR people because he set up the call, and I could see his eyes light up when he was watching their reaction. And they were like, holy crap, we wish we had this 2 years ago. Like, this is awesome. And you could they're just talking about all the experiences of interviews where they realize by interview number 3 the person's fake or the person swapped out. And the problem is if you get to interview number 3, you've spent all the money and time and effort to get to that situation. So they lose. If you're interviewing 50 interviews a week, then your percentage of wasteful money is pretty high. So it does add up pretty quick.
There's another kind of going back to the thing about, like, does it matter to you if someone has, 2 or 3 jobs? Like, ultimately, like, if they're doing what they said they'd do for you, then does it matter? There's an element of that when it comes to AI as well, like the use of AI. Yeah. So, like, yes, it's frowned upon. Like, if you're taking a college exam, in most cases, it's frowned upon for you to like be sitting there actively using AI to find the answers. Like the point was for you to learn the information, not for you to be able to look it up. If you're doing an interview, especially like if you're doing an interview for like a developer, like you kind of want to know, like, okay, well, what do you know about coding? Not what can you find from Claude? Yeah. Yeah. That said,
I want to know what you know about coding. I don't want to care about what you can do in Lovable.
Well, I was going to say, that said, once you have the job, so many employers now are like mandating AI. They're measuring your performance based on are you or are you not using AI. Yeah. And so to some extent, I'd be like, well, maybe don't make that such a deal breaker in the interview. Like if the goal, like if the whole point, once I'm hired, you're going to want me to be proficient at using AI tools to find the answers and be productive. If I can do that in real time in the interview, you should hire me on the spot.
Yeah, and here's I love, by the way, I love where you're going with this, because the thing that we're trying to expose to the employer is the likelihood of them using AI in the interview. Different employers will have different tolerances. Some employers will celebrate it, and some will frown upon it. I think here's the way I would suggest people think of this. Was it the 80s that calculators were invented or started to be seen around?
Probably late 70s, but yeah.
So before then, when you were doing an exam, like a math exam, you're not allowed to use a calculator. But at some point, you were allowed to use a calculator in the exam, because people recognize that when you graduate and when you go into work, you will use a calculator in your work. You're not going to sit there and slowly figure it out. You're going to whiz it up in a calculator. So I think to your point, that's exactly where we're going to be with AI. I do think I think the AI thing is going to be good and bad for 909 Select and 909 Shield, because in Select, the marketplace, I think there's going to be more people looking for gig work in the tech industry, because I think there's going to be a lot more layoffs. And then there's going to be companies that realize they need somebody for 10 hours a week, not 40 hours a week. So I see that is playing into what we service there. And when you're doing a high risk job, then you need to have confidence as the employer that that person is who they say they are, which plays in very nicely to both the marketplace and Shield. So yeah, and as a cyber practitioner, for me, it's always been about humans. Humans are the front line of your defense. They're also the front line of your culture in your company. They're all, so when you think of employing humans in your company, you're trying to trust who they are, what they bring, and that they're going to meet your culture. And that interview stage is that chance to do it. So it's important that you don't hire. And I did hear a company that the story, basically they hired a North Korean laptop farm worker. They discovered it within 24 hours, which is pretty quick. But within 24 hours, they had access. You'd shipped the laptop. You'd already gone down this expensive path. They'd got through all the interviews, and the company was none the wiser until they turned up on day one and started exfilling all the data.
Right.
They're like, hey, why is Jonathan taking all this in? Why is Jonathan accessing all this shit? So yeah, it's a fascinating thing, Tony. And as I said, when I built 909 Cyber, I never thought of this. I never planned to be a marketplace and a HR shield and stuff. Never planned that. Just planned, hey, I need a consulting practice. We want to be the best we can be at a price point that is affordable for mid-sized companies. And in doing so, then trying to help students, we end up here.
Okay.
So I think of that as being like the universe being like, oh, Dan, you're trying to do something heroic and heartfelt for students, your little passion project, and then it evolves to this.
Okay. Well, but to your point, like going back to the very beginning with the number from the FTC and stuff, it's like one of the things I think people are aware of and they know about things like the scenario you just described. Someone hires someone, turns out that it's a North Korean farm, and they start exfiltrating data, et cetera, et cetera. What I think a lot of people don't maybe understand is the scope of the iceberg and all the little things that add up, like you mentioned in the beginning, of like, even if you figure it out before you hire someone, if it takes you 9 interviews, then you've still wasted time. You've still wasted resources. There's still an impact. There's still a financial impact to a company, even if you never hire someone fraudulently. Like just having them in the process costs you money.
Yeah. And that was one thing I just done the search there, right? So if I don't quite know the source on this one yet, but I've seen different numbers in a one hire cycle. Like if you lose $7,000, this is one of the numbers here, and it's different for obviously every cycle. But if you lose $7,000 worth of time through the hire cycle, and that number adds up if you're hiring regularly. So I think of a lot of agencies, especially like recruitment agencies. I think a lot of companies like the Big Four, like a PwC, or any company that's in a growth cycle. Some companies are like, oh, well, we're not doing much hiring right now, but I fail to see, even if you're hiring one employee, why this wouldn't help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, I'll step back and say a completely separate conversation on the interview and hiring process would be, I personally think most companies are doing too many rounds of interviews. Like, I was interviewing with a company, beginning of last year or 2 years ago, and it was, I was like 6 interviews in. I mean, I got down to like the final round, but 6, 7 interviews, and I'm like, that's too many. Like, I just need to talk like,
Yeah.
because companies will have you like talk to like the hiring manager, the hiring manager's manager. I mean, well, actually, first you have to get past the HR screener, then it's the hiring manager, then it's the manager's manager, then it's like every single person on the team, like every one of your coworkers individually, so that everyone can collaborate. Then and ultimately, I'm like, my own philosophy on it is kind of like, if I'm the hiring manager, I want to do the interview and then just make a decision. Like, I've got your resume, I've got your CV. I know what I need to know about you on that level. The interview for me is just do we vibe? Like, will you work with this team? And I'm personally much more inclined to just make that decision and hire someone, and just know that it doesn't have to be permanent. If it doesn't work out, you can hire someone else. But I feel like the 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds of interviews are a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah. Oh no. I think, I look at it like maybe 4 is the magic number. You've got the HR person at the very beginning, the hiring manager, and then you maybe have a technical thing or whatever competency. And that for me is good as a group interview. And then finally you meet the hiring manager again, just so that they can sound you out and then call it done. And I think there's an efficiency. One thing that we will build in the future in our roadmap on Shield, there's actually 2 things that are pretty slick. One is, we're the video platform you use for the call, right? It's not a Zoom, it's not a WebEx, it's our video platform. And as part of that, we can take that transcription and the call, and then we can actually do analysis on the call and the quality of the interviewer. Because the other thing as well is, can we use this from an HR perspective to improve the quality of the interviewer themselves? And that's a really good situation. Or analyzing the interviews and the candidates and then doing some other analysis on your selection. How are you writing that, even the job description and stuff like that? So there's some knock-on benefits. And then over time, the more people we have in our system, then we could say in the future that a company could run all the email addresses from their system through our system and just get a trust score for each one. So imagine like 5 years from now, we are sitting there with, 50,000 or 100,000 identities, because these identities are portable, right? I mean, every call you're using, if you're using our platform, we know more about you. You've been building trust. We could give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So when you're looking at your hiring platform can have an API call to our platform. And just as people apply, we can even do the thumbs up and thumbs down straight away on application. So that will save you time. I mean, there's quite a few possibilities as we play this out over the years, because the more data we have in the platform, then that identity of the human and the trust is a huge play. And it's really funny, right? I mean, you know my career, Tony, right? I've done identity since 1992. I was a Novell guy. And for some reason, 34 years later, I'm still doing identity. It's like I can't get away from that shit, But I do love it. I mean, it's a fun space and security.
Well, and I feel like in the ebb and flow kind of cyclical nature of cybersecurity, it's like other things kind of like overshadowed it, but like we're back to a point where it's like we've where we are technologically, we've come to a point where it's like identity that is the perimeter, that is the front line. I used to be able to have a firewall around my office network and just say, okay, well, I'll keep the bad guys out and the good guys in. But everything we use today, it's like that perimeter doesn't exist. And so literally at the point that I log in, or at the point that my device connects to an application, at the point that a server connects to another server, like that, whatever that identity is, that authentication process is, that's the whole ball of wax.
Yeah. And I was thinking, right, so the very first podcast I'd done on your show was at Adobe, probably about 2017, 2018. And we had just deployed Zero Trust. And we were talking about identities being the front line of defense, blah, 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 blah. And that is when you're in the door. Now, at this point with Shield, we're talking about before you get in the door, recognizing that the other front line is who you're allowing to come in the door or in the virtual door, because we're all remote, but many people are remote, right? But yeah, who do you allow in your virtual door as employees of your company or even as contractors? Because this problem is not just full-time employees, this could be contractors too, or quite highly contractors. So I mean, it's cool, man. It's like, yeah, I just look at this storied career where I'm applying principles that I would have applied 30 years ago, and now we're applying the principles of security to the process of hiring people. And it's pretty, it's pretty exciting, because also in our research, as we were building this, obviously we're looking to see, well, what's the competition? We can find some companies that are doing a little bit of the identity proofing, or they're doing a little bit of the deep fake thing, but we don't see a company that's got the whole package. And I look at that like there probably must be one that exists somewhere, but we just didn't.
I don't know. I think I
found one yet.
From what I can see, and I don't claim to be an expert across the whole spectrum, but I think that the concepts you're bringing in terms of portable ID and the trust score tie things together in a way that other solutions don't. There are other companies that are dealing with like pieces of this, but then it's on you to try to like put the pieces together and draw a complete picture of the candidate. This seems to be, because you are layering, kind of identity proofing, the biometric continuity monitoring, telemetric risk scoring, AI fraud detection, all into a single trust score for the individual. I think is a more comprehensive approach.
Yeah, and that was and that's our plan. I mean, I also think so we've got 4 pieces to that puzzle, right? And then the identity is portable as more companies would use the platform. I am already racking my brain on what's the 5th and the 6th. What are the other things? And when a CISO talks about somebody using an earpiece, I'm like, oh wow, like I don't mind trying to solve that problem. I mean, that to me sounds like well, how would we solve that problem? And I do think that's pretty tricky. I mean, I haven't got an answer to that yet, but when I think of just the other issues and we speak with more CISOs and HR leaders, then I'm like, okay, there's another problem out there.
Right. Well, this is a related but separate issue. But I had a conversation last year with someone who said that part of the return to office mandate wasn't just companies being draconian or companies wanting to fill seats because they're paying rent. That this problem was part of it. Like, if I make you come to the office, then I know that you're not in North Korea. If I make you come to the office, I can see who you are. And that, so that can be an element of this, is to say, and it's kind of funny because I just saw someone post something on LinkedIn this week that basically said, it's kind of funny that technology has gotten to the point where we kind of need to reject the technology. Like it's gotten to the point where it's like, now we need to have face-to-face conversations because it's the only thing I can trust.
Yeah. And I find that to be one of the fascinating sides of this, right? Which is almost, and I describe it like there's a pyramid. When you're doing the higher up jobs, the more executive ones, then those ones you definitely want to pull in person, right? But as you go down the pyramid to the jobs where you're saying, okay, mid-level managers, then engineers, analysts, whatever, that number becomes bigger. And when I think of Shield, I really think of Shield being applicable to all of it, but I think the value proposition is really that broad bit in the middle, where you're doing the individual contributors, whether they're full-time or freelancers. That's, I think, where it matters. And for us, to be honest, it mattered for our marketplace. That's why we started to build it, because we're like, in the marketplace where you are a freelancer, then generally speaking, I need to gain trust instantly on that conversation, because I'm only hiring you for 10 hours a week and I'm maybe only doing it for 40 hours. I need to know very quickly. To your point, Tony, you can't do 7 interviews when you're going to hire a freelancer. You need
Right.
to do one.
Well,
And in
especially because
one,
if you are only hiring someone for a 40-hour project, even if it's a 100-hour project, but it's a short-term gig,
yeah,
I'm hiring you for a month or two. It's like I don't really want to spend 3 weeks and 10 interviews to make that decision.
yeah,
That's me expending far more resources on making the decision than what you're going to
yeah.
give me in return.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I mean, so from the marketplace, this is why you go in there, you can see their Uber style reviews, you can see what employers have written about them. And by the way, I don't want to close on the marketplace topic, but as the freelancer, your data is obfuscated until you choose to connect to the employer. So we're protecting the freelancers, we're protecting the employer, we manage the money, all that stuff. Timesheets is all in there too, so you can see it as the employer. So it's pretty slick. But we did focus a lot of time on well, if I'm going to have one interview, let me make sure in the interview process that there's trust.
Yeah.
And we combat that fraud thing, which is huge. And we're the only platform that's going to be able to do it. Now, then we thought, well, wait a minute, that's a bit selfish. Let's spin 909 Shield out, because I don't care if like LinkedIn or some of these, or even Upwork or Fiverr, I don't care. They can knock on our door and we can license and they can use the product too. Why? I don't care.
Well,
We're all in different markets and there's enough money to go around. Let's protect people before they join the company, you know?
yeah. Well, let's wrap on this then. Let's close with you. You mentioned design partners. You're working on recruiting design partners. What does the ideal design partner look like? Is there a specific industry, hiring volume, tech stack? Like what are you and what are you
Yeah.
asking the design partners to do?
Yeah. That's brilliant. Yeah, and so I had that conversation exactly yesterday with a CISO of a tech forward company in the Valley. I think for us, it's some company which does a lot of hiring. Their hiring volume, the more the better. So if they're doing, and think of it like the number of calls more than the number of open recs. But so if they're doing, 100 calls a week, that's great for us. Um, if they're doing 50 a week, it's also good too. So I think any number above the 50 calls a week would be wonderful. We only want 5 design partners, and then when you're a design partner, we're going to lock you in at the price point, like the business partner price point, which will be very low, and you'll be locked in for 3 years, we think, around about there. And all it takes is we're going to do a call with the design partner team once every 2 weeks or once a month. We're going to have questionnaires that we'll ask them to fill out once a month. Within the platform, there'll be a feedback button so that they can give us feedback on a regular basis anytime they're seeing stuff. And then as we get their feedback for the next 3 years, they'll be the ones that we go to help shape the product. So think of it like a customer advisory board as well, Tony, where we've got 5 companies that are with us from the beginning for the next 3 years on the journey,
Right.
and they're locked in. And then we actually listen to them. I do a lot of advisory boards over the years, right? And I remember walking out famously on one of them after the first 3 hours because there was no advising. It was we were hearing their roadmap, and their roadmap was set. They wanted feedback on the roadmap, but nothing we said was really going to change the roadmap. And we recognized that, so we just left. When the 2 guys from Adobe walk out of your advisory board, it's quite obvious. it's quite a thing. I commit to the companies that if you're part of this, we will listen. We will look to shape the product in a way that benefits them. And if it benefits them, we're thinking it'll benefit others too. So we're being pretty selective, and then we're nailing 2 down. Hopefully, this week or next week, and by the end of June, I hope to have 3 more. And then at that point, we still want companies to reach out, obviously, because look,
Right.
we're trying to get early adopters, and the more we get, the more feedback. So yeah,
All right.
it's exciting, man.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join me. I think it'll be interesting. I'll have you back on in another 6 months or a year, and we can talk about how it all pans out.
Plays out. Yeah. But how's this baby going to fly, right? So, Tony, thank you very much as always, man. I appreciate you. This is always fun to come on and catch up. Yeah, and I'd love to come back at some point and just share where we're at.
Perfect.